All right, good afternoon. I call to order the Lynchburg Planning Commission meeting for Wednesday, September 13th, 2017. Thank you all for attending, and thanks to Tom for running our last meeting, taking care of the show. Good training for chairmanship next year. We're going to jump right into our public hearing items. We do have several. I want to remind the audience when we get to them that we do have time constraints. They're all described in the agenda, and Robin will have a clock on you. It's not an issue, but we just want to make sure everyone has a fair opportunity to express their concerns or support. Our first public hearing item is the petition of Bell Terrace Developers, LLC, to rezone approximately 19 7/10 acres located at 226, 300, 306, 312, and 404 Alta Lane from R1 low-density residential district to R2 low-medium-density residential district to allow the subdivision of the property into 44 single household lots. Rachel.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. These 5 properties involved in the petition are currently zoned R1 low-density residential. These areas are intended to provide for residential development at low densities together with public or institutional uses and private recreational facilities that are in scale with single household residences. R1 zoning allows for densities of up to 2.9 dwelling units per acre. And the comprehensive plan's future land use map recommends a low-density residential land use for the area as well. These areas are intended to include single-family detached housing at densities of up to 4 dwelling units per acre. The proposed 44-lot development has a density of 2 23/100 units per acre. Therefore, the density is in agreement with the land use indicated on the flume, which again is 4. And is below the current limit on the existing R1 zone, which is 2.9 units per acre. It's a lot of numbers. I don't know if you can see this, but this is a comparison of the two. The 2.23 units per acre is also well below the existing R1 zone. Sorry, I just said that. And if approved, the subdivision could actually be developed at a density of up to 4.35 units per acre, which would not agree with the flume's designation of up to 4. But as I said in the report, achieving a higher density than what's indicated on the plan would probably be difficult, but again, it would be allowed by right at that point. The Technical Review Committee reviewed this petition on August 22nd, 2017. Comments were minor in nature and will be addressed by the petitioner prior to final plan approval. Planning staff recommends approval of the project, and I'll be happy to answer any questions you may have after the public hearing.
Thank you. Who is here to speak on behalf of this petition?
Good afternoon. My name is Norma Walton. I'm with Perkins and Orson, and I'm representing the petitioner here for this rezoning. Some things I wanted to reiterate that Rachel mentioned. She did an excellent job introducing the project. Is that we are below the R1 density as well below the flume density. We're at 2.23 dwellings per acre. The flume allows 4. R1 is 2.9. Which were less than the R1, and R2 does allow 4.35, as Rachel mentioned. Can we see the layout, please, Tom? There, thank you. Thank you, Rachel. As Rachel mentioned, you can go to 4.35 units per acre with R2, but as you can see, with the configuration of the parcel, it would be very difficult to get any more lots than what we show currently on this plan, especially with the limited limits of road frontage, front and rear yard setbacks and whatnot. We feel that this is as dense as this property can be developed. It's less than the flume. We are able to serve with water, sewer. We don't anticipate traffic being a huge issue. It will be an increase on Alta Lane. I realize there are some already traffic concerns on Alta Lane where the city has installed traffic calming measures in the past. I am here as well as Ted Bell, and we'll be more than happy to answer any questions you may have as you go through your deliberation. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Is there anyone here to speak in favor of this petition? Anyone opposed? All right, at this point, the public hearing is closed. Commissioners, questions for staff or the petitioner?
I really don't have questions. I do have a concern dealing with the amount of traffic that's going to be brought in to both Alta Lane and Grove Road. Alta Lane, I was out there yesterday and I was out there today, as well as on Grove Road. And that tends to be a tad bit of a narrow road. And it's definitely a traffic calmed area. That's for sure, with the islands that were put in there. I reckon I'm just a little bit concerned about the influx of vehicles that can be added onto the traffic flow there, because they can have 3 unrelated occupants per dwelling. So we can put lots of cars based on this 44 lots if you have 3 unrelated people living in each house. Not that we're saying that's going to happen, but that potential does exist, and we at least have to acknowledge that. But I'm just a little bit concerned about the amount of traffic that we're going to be adding to both Alta Lane and Grove Road. I'm not too sure which is going to be the main entrance to the complex, or will be equally divided. But that's my big concern, is the traffic.
Right. I think it is important to note that they are proposing a lower density than is actually allowed by right out there at the moment. So by right, more houses and more traffic could actually go into this area.
I recognize that, and I actually like the fact that it is a lower density. If there's a big plus, that is a humongous big plus. But I was just still going back there looking and saying, wow, we got some skinny roads. And just trying to visualize additional traffic. I did walk back into the property a ways there, and looks great. Nice to see something's going to happen with that. But again, I'm just concerned about the traffic. I am surprised we have no residents here to speak for or against it. Everything, especially on the Grove Road side. So I was over there today looking, and I thought surely we'd have someone to speak one way or the other, since one of the entrances is splitting 2 houses.
Right. We did receive a couple of calls that were noted the standard concerns that neighbors usually have about stormwater, dust, increased traffic. What about the safety of walkers in the neighborhood? I do think it is an added value for the residents of the neighborhood that there's going to be a sidewalk on the new street. That'll be a requirement. And again, as far as the additional traffic, it is a concern. However, it could actually be more traffic than what they are proposing.
Yes, I agree
without a rezoning. They could do
very
more.
True, very true. And the city had no concerns about getting their vehicles in and out, like fire department and everything.
The traffic engineer did not require a study as part of this.
Okay. I just got caught behind the trash truck yesterday, and it was just like, holy cow. I just found it very a calming situation.
That'll slow traffic down.
Yes, it did.
So where is the sidewalk going? I don't remember seeing or reading where that was mentioned.
Norm, I don't know if you want to speak to the road, water, sewer plans at all.
And I realize that this scale is difficult to see, but we had sidewalks on both sides of the roadway going throughout the development,
Okay.
a 5-foot sidewalk. Continuing on Mr. Lowe's comment earlier, the Grove Road connection was an existing connection. There was a public right-of-way already dedicated off of Grove Road between those lots. It was, I guess with the interconnectivity from the city, you know, we were asked to make that connection to Grove Road. A couple of years ago, one of our first layouts on this property did not connect to Grove Road, but since there's a stubbed right-of-way there, there was a connection there. The Alta Lane entrance will be the primary entrance. We feel that the connection to Grove Road will probably help the citizens of the Grove Road area more than Alta Lane, because that'll provide a quicker access out to Leesville Road.
And I actually thought Alta was set up pretty well to keep speeders down.
Oh, yeah.
It was posted really well. It had the medians.
Oh, it is very calm road.
It would be hard. Traffic might go up a little bit, but it's not going to be people flying through that area.
I'm more concerned about the overall size of the road for the traffic.
Just being able to accommodate it.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, my concern is that even though the indication is it's not going to go up to 4.35 units, the potential to do that still exists. And you made a pretty good case why you wouldn't do that. But I'm always concerned when that door is left open so that it can be done, because things do change. But I think there's a pretty good argument for the whole project, and with the net result being better than the current situation. And I like the fact that you're achieving this by leaving some green areas in the neighborhood, which is good.
Oh, there's quite a bit of green area left there.
And in some of the steeper slopes, too.
Yeah. I went back down to the other apartment complexes off Leesville Road and looked back up there where, like, yeah, there's lots of green back there they're not building on, so that looked really good.
And I think this will actually spruce up that area some. A lot of the houses are old, and I think it will increase the value.
And Vista Acres Swim Club will have additional members.
A question, Norm. Is there any common green space, or I see lot 20 is huge and lot 10 is pretty big, but those would be privately owned, right?
That is correct. There's no designated open space lots on the plan.
Any other questions or comments or concerns? All right. Do we have a motion?
I will make the motion that we approve the. Oh God! Let's see if I can blow it so I can read it here. Make a motion that we approve the petition of Bell Terrace developers to rezone approximately 19 and 7/10 acres located at 226, 300, 306, 312, and 44 Alta Lane from R1 Low Density Residential District to R2 Low Medium Density Residential District to allow the subdivision of the property into 44 single household lots.
Thank you. Second? All right. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? All right. And a reminder as we go through these public hearing items that our job is to just make a recommendation to City Council. They'll be making the final calls, as most of you know. So you'll get to repeat this again in a few weeks in front of them, regardless of our recommendations. All right. Thank you. Good luck with that project. Our second public hearing item is the petition of Liberty University Incorporated for a conditional use permit at 1971 University Boulevard to allow the expansion of the existing football stadium for 5,800 spectators. The property is zoned Institutional 2, Institutional District, and after completion, the stadium would have a total capacity of 25,000 spectators. Tom, thank you.
Mr. Chair, members of the Planning Commission, the purpose of this petition is to approve a conditional use permit that would allow the expansion of the existing Williams Stadium from right around 19,200 seats to 25,000 seats. This seating expansion would allow Liberty University to move into the Football Bowl subdivision, or FPS, as part of its continued growth of this major Lynchburg institution. The property is currently zoned IM2, Institutional 2 District. However, arenas and stadiums for their expansions do require conditional use permits within these districts. The major impact obviously associated with the stadium expansion is related to traffic, and it's anticipated to be such. However, Liberty University has and continues to invest in transportation infrastructure both on and surrounding their campus to improve congestion in the area of the university. As part of the proposal, Liberty University is also proposing satellite parking areas in 2 locations, one of which is River Ridge Mall, and is proposing shuttle service on game days with bus stops proposed as part of the stadium expansion. This campus is also served by the Greater Lynchburg Transit Company. As required by the zoning ordinance and recommended as a condition of the CUP, Liberty will be preparing a traffic study to look at the impacts that the seating increase would have on the road network. The ordinance requires that anything, that the level of service standard remain at a D, and if the traffic study comes back and shows that improvements need to be maintained, if improvements are needed to be done to maintain that level of service, then the university would be responsible for those. In order to get good data, what the university is proposing is to do the traffic counts and analysis on a game day, and I believe they're doing that in the next week or so. So that should give give very good insight into what traffic conditions are around the stadium and what improvements would actually be needed. This approach is acceptable to the city's transportation engineer, and he will be reviewing the traffic analysis when it comes in. The Planning Division does recommend approval of the conditional use permit.
Great, thank you. Who is here to speak on behalf of this petition? Come forward, sign in, and state your name, please.
My name is Dan Dieter. I'm with Liberty University.
Is there anything you'd like to add to Mr. Martin's report?
No, I think he summed it up very well. This is our step on getting into the FBS and really helping enlarge the university exposure nationally, and we think it's going to be a great thing for not only Liberty but for Lynchburg. So we're very excited about the expansion project.
Great. Thank you. We may have more questions. I think we just keep you up here for a minute. Is there anyone from the public who's here to speak in favor of this petition who would like to speak in favor? Anyone opposed? All right, public hearing is closed. Questions or comments?
I just had one out of curiosity. I see you're adding a roundabout. Is that right? In the sort of the center left?
Yes.
Are you taking out a small roundabout above that?
Oh, yeah, I'm sorry. The small roundabout that's up by the bookstore, we are trying to streamline that more into a true Liberty University Drive would pass through. And what we're trying to do with future projects is we're looking at closing University Boulevard because it is such a heavy student population. Maybe turn that over to the students, and then you can see on this drawing we actually show a road going between 460 and the bookstore. That would be more the University Boulevard for vehicular, and we can really keep the student population safer because with the School of Business and DeMoss and the hill dorms and the tower and all that academic right there, we really would like to keep the cars out of there. So
the road will go up and then turn to the right and not go to the left at that Y.
right, we would keep it open just to the visitor center and then block it off. So if you're going to the visitor center, that would be the only reason you'd have to go on that spur. So.
Tom, I have a question for you. So the company that will be conducting the traffic study is chosen by Liberty?
Correct, but the standards and what's in the traffic study has to be approved by the city's transportation engineer, and that's reviewed by the city transportation engineer. So EPR, Bill Winch is who's doing it, who has been used on many projects before, has actually done work for the city.
So the city traffic department, when they look over it, then they come up with any suggestions, and Liberty is, according to this, is required to do it no matter what. Like it doesn't have to come back in front of us. It doesn't.
No, they'll
they
be
are
required
to do it. No questions asked. Like
Correct.
whatever the city comes up with based on the traffic.
What the study shows is needed and is concurred to by the transportation engineer, they'll be required to do. So it's not like if the study doesn't support it, the transportation engineer isn't just going to
come up with something.
Pull stuff down. It has to be supported by the study.
But that's only if the level of service drops below D,
Correct.
which is pretty low, right?
Yes.
Is there one below it?
F.
Yeah. So the bar is already pretty low. And do we have an idea of what the current level of service is on game days?
I don't know. I do know they do a very good job of keeping traffic moving.
I mean, and that's...
Which we will know once they collect the data.
And let's face it, if there's an event of that size, you're not going to have a great level of service. You wouldn't expect a B or something like that, and I think that's fine.
Right.
They had a game this past Saturday. We didn't hear any outcry. I haven't heard any yet.
Yeah,
I don't think it was one of the bowl contenders or anything, but it was.
You either attend and accept the traffic, or you know to stay away on home game days. I mean, that's.
Or you ride the bus.
Or you ride the bus. Yep.
So the traffic study attached with the traffic circle. The traffic circle is not really included in this plan.
They're going to do that anyway, I believe.
Okay.
However, it should help to improve conditions, obviously.
But the traffic study is going to study the city's roads, streets, and
it's going to study the road network that's serving that area.
Yeah.
We actually did the sampling this past week.
Oh, you've already done it? Okay, great.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I think the idea of the game days is good for any city, and it's certainly going to help the hotels and businesses and everything else, restaurants and all right around there. So, and there's enough being done in my mind to offset any concerns. I think they're being very proactive about it. Any other thoughts? Do we have a motion? I think we can make the motion for the petition as written. Someone wants to.
I'll make a motion to recommend to council to approve the petition as written.
Great. A second?
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Great. Recommending approval. Thank you.
Thank
Good
you.
luck with that.
Thank you.
All right, our third public hearing item, a consideration of amending section 35.2-46.2, exhibit 4-15, authorized uses in B3 district of the zoning ordinance to allow tattoo parlors as a use permitted by right.
Mr. Chair, members of the Planning Commission, this was actually initiated by this body back on August 9th of this year at the request of a citizen Mr. C.J. Hicks, who has a tattoo parlor in a B3 district right now, which is obviously not permitted by right. As we discussed last time, tattoo parlors are currently permitted by right in the city's B4, which is the urban commercial downtown, B5 general business districts, and the institutional 2 districts. We looked at other first cities, what they require for tattoo parlors, and there's just a vast range. They either require conditional use permits for them, they either only allow them in their most intense districts like we do now, or they allow them by right in all of their business districts, and they look at them as just a personal service and artistic expression, really. So when we looked at it, our B3 districts are really very closely associated with our community commercial uses on the future land use map. And those areas are really the B3 and the B5 areas, your heavy retail parts of the city. These are very large shopping centers that draw people from either several neighborhoods or the entire city or even the region. They include things like restaurants, hotels, any type of retail, your personal services. Staff believes that inclusion of a tattoo parlor within the B3 district would have very minimal impact on the city's zoning, and the Planning Division does recommend approval of the amendment.
Great, thank you. And since the petitioner is the city of Lynchburg, we will go straight to the public to see if anyone is here to speak in favor of this. Anyone opposed? All right, public hearing is closed. We can discuss it.
I don't see how that it would have a huge impact one way or the other. I don't have any problem with it.
I feel like we kind of discussed it last time, and I'm completely fine with the change.
Unfortunately, I was not here for it, but I read up on it, and actually the young lady that does my hair and I discussed tattoo parlors, and she said she couldn't see any reason why there shouldn't be one right there in the Walmart parking shopping area or some other place there, because most of them are very well upkept, not seedy. They're all artistic expressions, and so I support it.
Felt the same way. Culturally, things have changed. We just see the banker with the tattoo. It's a normal. It's a social norm.
Yep.
So, just like a hairstylist would be. So I'd be supportive.
Okay. Well, Tom, this is one of those rare times where I don't really have an opinion, one way or the other. So I can't show them here. So this is a case where I just rely on, as I usually do anyway, city staff and their recommendations. So I see no reason not to support it. So do we have a motion for this petition as written?
I'll make a motion to accept the petition.
Second?
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All right, opposed? All right, get some tattoos.
No way.
Yeah.
Zone or die.
Our fourth public hearing item, a consideration of amending Section 35.2-67, sidewalks and pedestrian connectivity to provide alternatives to when sidewalks are considered as part of any development subject to site plan review.
Sure. So we went through this last time, but I know two of you weren't here, so I'll go through it quickly. The zoning ordinance revisions were adopted by council in February of 2016, and as you know, the city and the city's citizens put a great amount of work and effort and time into adopting that. As part of those revisions, the Section 35.267 required that sidewalks be required along all streets for any development that's subject to site plan review. It also required that any multi-household, mixed-use, or multi-occupant commercial center and institutional uses provide safe, clearly marked and continuous walkways from that sidewalk to the building entrances. As it is written today, the zoning administrator may lessen or eliminate requirements for sidewalks, really based on a couple of reasons. One, if the cross slopes of the existing right-of-way are 25% or greater, and also if there's stormwater conveyances or any other type of physical constraint that would render the construction of that sidewalk unfeasible. These are the sidewalk widths that would be required for the different zoning districts. They range anywhere from 5 to 8 feet. Where are we in terms of sidewalk requirements? We've actually been requiring them as part of subdivisions since July 2010. And it's on at least one side of the new residential street or on both sides with a traffic count of 6,000 vehicles per day, which is a lot of traffic. That's probably unreasonable because that's never going to be achieved, I would think. But the main difference in the subdivision ordinance requirement for sidewalks and the zoning ordinance requirement is that the cost is shared 50-50 by the city and the developer because we cost share residential streets. So sidewalks are widely supported by the city's comprehensive plan, better streets and enhanced mobility for all residents through safe and convenient access to transportation choices that attend to the needs of pedestrians, bicyclists, transit riders, and motorists, and also the goals that we coordinate building design and site design with the design of our streets and public facilities. So really the only reason you would not require a sidewalk is if it's an area that you do not want people walking. So think about that. What are we trying for the city to be in the next 20 years? And that was the purpose of the comprehensive plan. And that's why it was so detailed on encouraging walkability in the city. There's also several guiding principles that support sidewalks, and also the city has a better streets policy that's adopted as part of the comprehensive plan. It's called the Better Streets Policy, and the purpose of that policy is really to strike a balance between all users, regardless of their physical abilities or their mode of travel. So not just prioritizing the vehicular travel, but attending to the needs of people, prioritizing pedestrians, bicyclists, transit, street trees, stormwater utilities, and livability. So again, better streets. How can we make the streets better within the city of Lynchburg? Showed this slide last time. You can see where you can look at the existing street network compared to where sidewalk accommodations are. And as you can see, compared to the street network, our sidewalks are very limited. So by design, or the way the city has developed, has been very vehicular oriented. Yet we have a comprehensive plan that is trying to promote more walkability, alternative modes of transportation. Sidewalks also obviously promote quality of life, active living, good health. It improves the safety along walkways, and it also provides transportation choices. They're also needed for other modes of transportation. So if we want to promote mass transit, that's great. But if you have a bus stop, which we do have bus stops in the area, in the city, that have no sidewalks, all right? So how do we expect people to get from the bus stop to where they need to be when there's no sidewalk? And what's developed is obviously what planners call pig paths, dirt paths along the side of the road, and it's not safe. It also promotes social equity. Travel mode is not a choice for all city residents. You have the young, the old, the disabled, and the very low income, people that may not have a car, can afford a car, or have the ability to drive a car. And sidewalks promote access to goods, services, and jobs that are severely limited by land use patterns and the availability of transportation around the city. Let's read that again. Severely limited by land use patterns and availability of the transportation around the city. Now, if you look at the way the city's developed since the last annexation in 1976, it's been a very suburban-style model, okay, very vehicular-oriented, and we're trying to go back over time and fix that. And that's one of the things that the sidewalk ordinance was intended to do. Obviously, sidewalks promote economic development. Employers want to attract good employees. Studies have shown that employees want walkable communities, and it encourages denser development and efficient land use. Park once, walk to where you need to go. It also is good for the environment, and it reduces automobile reliance and vehicular congestion. Supported by many Lynchburg initiatives, Live Healthy Lynchburg, Bridges Us Out of Poverty, adopted priorities for transportation. But there are also concerns that we discussed. There's financial concerns. They can be relatively expensive at times, and the going cost is about $50 per linear foot. That would be a 5-foot section. The location, you will probably hear in the next few minutes, sidewalks to nowhere, because there's no other sidewalks in the area. My response to that is this is a way to build the city's sidewalk network over time, just the way the street network has been built over time. And then, obviously, with city projects, there's budgeting concerns. So we discussed several examples last time, and basically it was they could be attributed to really 3 to 4 common themes. Projects that had multiple street frontages, such as James River Day School. A sidewalk, multiple street frontages where a sidewalk would be on a street, could be required on a street with very low traffic volumes. Again, very low traffic volumes on 16th Street. Or very small project. There was a proposal to build a building addition in the back here, less than 5,000 square feet. Yet, since there was a site plan required, the ordinance would have required at least 400 feet of sidewalk to be built along Florida Avenue. Now, would sidewalk along Florida Avenue be a good thing for the city? Of course it would. Is it equitable to require, as part of such a small development, to have that developer construct that amount of sidewalk? So what city staff did is we went back and took comments from the commission and actually one of the local architects that kind of spearheaded the suggestion that changes were needed. And we drafted, I had it up. The amendments that are before you. So the first thing that the amendment proposes is that it takes out the provision that it's provided along all streets for any development. And what that's doing is it's addressing the developments with multiple street frontages, such as James River Day School or some of the others, and says that sidewalks will be provided along the street on which the development is addressed. So a sidewalk would be required on the primary street, and for developments with multiple street frontages along the secondary street frontage only. So if you have 4 street frontages or 3 street frontages, you would be required to at least put it on the primary street, the one that you're addressed, and the secondary street, which would be the street containing the highest number of vehicle trips per day. So that's the base requirement. However, the ordinance goes on and says the zoning administrator may lessen or eliminate, this is the language from the ordinance, it was just moved, for 25% or greater slopes, but also that the zoning administrator may eliminate the requirement for sidewalk on secondary streets when the secondary street has less than 100 vehicle trips per day. So if it's very low traffic counts, then that sidewalk would not be required. The key part of this, though, is existing vehicle trips and future vehicle trips. So if you look at the existing zoning in the area and the existing land use proposed for it that would be served by that secondary street, if in the future it could be over 100 vehicle trips per day, that sidewalk would be required. For the very small developments, we are proposing to not require sidewalks for any development requiring land disturbance less than 5,000 square feet. So this is for the very small projects. This 5,000 square foot threshold is a city stormwater threshold. So if there was a development that was not going over that, the sidewalk requirement would not kick in. However, it is cumulative, so you couldn't come in and do 4,999 this time and then 4,999 the next time. And that is the same way the stormwater ordinance works. And then in areas where sidewalks are not required, so we thought that this was very important, that if sidewalks are not required and grading occurs in the right-of-way, that the grading should at least be done in a manner that would not preclude the future installation of sidewalks, so that they give consideration to the way they are laying their slope backs. This just strikes again along all streets. And then down here, there was concern about how and when the actual crosswalks were being required across building entrances. So where warranted by the Manual of Uniform Traffic Control Devices was added. So that's a very brief description of the proposed ordinance requirements or amendments. I'm sure there'll be much discussion, and we'll be happy to answer questions as we move forward.
Great, thank you. And since the city is the petitioner, again, we will go right on to the general public. Is there anyone here from the public who would like to speak in favor of this petition? Anyone opposed? Come on forward, please, and sign in. State your name. Yes.
I actually don't have my iPad with me today, but I can watch it on the
Okay.
computer and just kind of let you know.
Thank you. And we're at 10 minutes windows right now. Is that right?
Well, it would be 3 minutes.
3 minutes. Okay.
Yeah,
3 minutes.
Maybe give you like a 10-second.
That's fine. Yep.
I think I'll use all my time just filling out the form.
We won't.
Don't start the time until you sign it.
Yeah, you put the pencil down.
The truth of the matter is I have neither a statement for nor against, but I'm interested in the topic and simply would like to know how to gain access to this document, which looks like it's an evolving thing. How is that done?
It's on our website, or we can give you a hard copy today if you like.
Hard copy is absolutely unnecessary. I'll follow up with you after.
Sure.
Thank you for your kindness.
You're very welcome.
Yeah, everything that's being discussed is publicly available. So it is on the web, or we, like they said, can't provide.
Planning Commission
Yeah.
agenda.
Yeah.
You can tell you how to get there.
Yeah, send you a link. Is there anyone else who is opposed to this petition? Come on forward and sign in, please.
I just have a statement. I can pass it out if you like. Would you like?
Yeah, we'd be glad to take some. And you can.
Anybody over there would like to have them, you may as well.
Do you have an extra?
They have them all there, so yes, ma'am.
We'll get you a copy.
Great. My name is John Heaton, and I'm the headmaster of New Covenant Schools, where I'm in my 20th year. And pardon me, I'm getting over a bad cold here, so I sound a little gravelly. I've developed a campus at 122 Fleetwood Drive since 2001 in 3 phases, consistent with the CUP that was acquired in 2001. The CUP was permitted a facility to accommodate about 420 students and was updated in 2013 to permit lighting of an athletic field. We have fulfilled our growth plan of 420 students, and we work really hard at maintaining a first-class facility and at being a good neighbor to the Keystone section of Lynchburg. In every phase of our development, I've worked with Tom and Kent White and others who have been around that long, and I can attest to their professionalism, so the objections that I'm about to raise are not personal to them at all or to any member of the city staff. The traffic that New Covenant Schools generates on Fleetwood Drive at drop-off and pickup times can be heavy 2 times a day, but it has not been such that the city traffic engineer has required either widening of Fleetwood or any other improvements of the right-of-way. Since completing the major portions of our campus, the additions to date involve expansion. Now they involve minor expansions here and there, like a room or a weight room, for example, or in addition to an existing building, something maybe similar to like what happened on Florida Avenue you heard just a moment ago. These projects range in size and scope, and our current one, being the addition of a weight room, resulted in a disturbance of right at 5,000. We kept it just under 5,000 square feet. The next one we do would likely be an expansion of our chapel, which would also be under 5,000 square feet, we expect. This project we're currently working on is about a $300,000 project, and we were astonished that the city was prepared to enforce the new sidewalk ordinance, which by itself would have required about 1,000 linear feet down Fleetwood Drive. We have the unfortunate privilege of having that much frontage on that particular road. Some of that area involves grading on severe slopes requiring site work, paving, likely requiring expansions to existing or even the construction of new retention ponds. This would not have cost the standard $50 a linear foot. You can throw that figure out. It's north of 100. We've been advised by our site engineers that our expected estimate on this could go in excess of $100,000 on top of a relatively small project similar to what Tom referenced on the Florida Avenue project. Tom also mentioned that you would hear sidewalks to nowhere, and that is exactly the case. We are bounded by 2 churches who are not likely to ever expand. Of course, things do change, but sidewalks that would begin in grass and end in the same. We were dismayed to discover that the current code had no provision at all for appeal, which prompted my calls to members of City Council who told me to come here today. Meanwhile, the requirement was waived, and at this time, the reasons for that are not altogether clear to me. I suspect that maybe the 5,000 square foot threshold was being honored maybe in advance of being passed, but I'm not sure. I wasn't actually told the reason. I do have an email from Ann Nygard in which she indicated that the requirement would be waived or not necessary. But in my conversations with Peter York at James River Day, it was much too late to get on his battleship because they had to put sidewalks all the way around their school on 3 sides, one of which was the subject of the ordinance today. So I would like to voice my objection to the existing and proposed ordinances on the following grounds, and they are not because I don't like sidewalks. I'm sorry. Am I over time?
We have reached our limit.
I'm sorry?
So if you just want to take a second or two and
Yes.
summarize your final points, that would be fine.
Sidewalks are nice. I like them, but I think the city should schedule those as a priority in the tax code. The main objection is that the city requires me, a single property owner and a nonprofit executive, to bear the enormously disproportional burden to provide sidewalks for growing populations. In my case, the neighborhoods have been greatly expanded after I was located there, and they are generating far more traffic than I do. And the pedestrians that wander out of the neighborhoods into my beautiful green space would probably like sidewalks. I would be happy to have sidewalks, But I don't think it's just for me to bear the entire burden of putting those sidewalks in just because I expand my chapel, which has nothing to do with drawing more of those people to my school.
Okay, thank you. And we
Thank
do have
you.
the rest of your
You do.
document here.
Thanks
We
very much.
appreciate it.
Appreciate it.
Is there anyone else from the public who would like to speak against this petition? We do have a letter from the Lynchburg Museum Foundation. I think everyone has a copy of that, and some of those views are similar to what we've just heard. Tom, as petitioner, would you like to respond at all right now to those points?
Because actually, in all due respect to Mr. Heaton, the requirement for the new covenant sidewalk really had nothing to do with the city's sidewalk ordinance. It was directly related to a condition of the conditional use permit that was approved by council back in 2001, I believe it was, which stated very clearly a sidewalk across the frontage of Fleetwood Drive would be required when the city engineer determined it to be needed. So entirely separate from the city's sidewalk ordinance. So even back in 2001, we were thinking about sidewalks. Now, you need to think about it. Again, that property was zoned, I believe it's single family, it's low density residential, and you took a major institution and put it in the middle of a single family area, right? And at the time, council said, you know, at some point you're going to grow to the point where traffic is going to be such that a sidewalk's needed for safety. Okay. The reason it was waived, because of the way the ordinances worked, anything that's under an old conditional use permit, we considered it grandfathered. The city engineer determined that at this time, because of the small addition, it would not be required. But any future additions, they were going to require it. I mean, again, you took a major institution and put it on a piece of property that's zoned residential, and there's been a tremendous amount of growth out there, and we're debating whether or not a sidewalk should be required along the frontage of that property, all right? And I would argue that, yes, it would be their responsibility because they're generating a large amount of the traffic in the area and the concerns. In a perfect world, which obviously we're not, and probably because we've made some very bad land use decisions, you wouldn't put these institutions in an area where you're forcing people to drive to them, right? Because I'm sure that Dr. Heaton would argue that probably none of the people that come to his school walk to it, right? So why was it put in that location? But again, that sidewalk is a requirement of the conditional use permit, and whether you scrap this ordinance today or tomorrow or leave it the way it is, that sidewalk is going to be required unless New Covenant School goes back through the entire conditional use permit and asks for that condition to be removed. So that's where that came from.
Was that sidewalk requirement because of the weight room or because of the fact that they've gotten
It was because of the entire campus. It was a condition of that CUP that allowed the school.
And it was waived for the weight room and the chapel, or those?
It was just waived at this point. Nowhere along the line did the city engineer say, you know, they could have done it back when they were building the school addition or when they first built the school, but they didn't. But it's going to get to the point where they're going to have to say, yes, you need to build this. Or the city engineer may say, no, you don't need to build it. I doubt that's going to happen on the next improvement. But again, it's a requirement of the CUP, not related to this ordinance.
And the weight room has already come before us, and
the weight room didn't need to come before you.
It didn't. What about the chapel?
It was on the master plan, so that wouldn't have to come back to you.
So neither of those will trigger anything.
No.
So at the moment, the sidewalk issue is moot for that particular piece of property because it has been waived?
It was, I mean, if we're talking realistically, it was a very bad condition, okay, because either the sidewalk was needed or it wasn't. But what happened is you put a condition in there that says, hey, city engineer, when you think the sidewalk is required, you can require it. Well, obviously, you just heard that the sidewalk's going to be very expensive. So then politics come into play. You know, is it really needed or not? Okay? And that's probably why it hasn't been required up to this point. You know, I would argue that the sidewalk is definitely required in that area. Obviously, planning supports sidewalks in the majority of the areas of the city, that being one of them. But again, I need to be very clear, and I want you to understand that the sidewalk condition of New Covenant School was a condition of their conditional use permit that has been approved many years ago, and not this sidewalk ordinance. Whether or not this sidewalk ordinance exists has nothing to do with the sidewalk requirement for New Covenant schools.
And I would also, it sounds like the two projects that Mr. Heath mentioned actually wouldn't be affected by this.
If it was today, no.
Right.
You know, but they have a condition that's sitting out there from a previous approval that's, you know, the city engineer, when he determines it's necessary, he can require it.
So I guess my question, because I did some research in this, like looking at Grand Rapids, they have similar wording in their sidewalks. We determine when it's necessary. Like, why is there no objectivity to this? And we talked about in the last meeting that it would be nice if there was some kind of objectivity that we could apply in certain cases. And if we look at the sidewalk map, how do we build out? In other words, I think there needs to be a much broader policy on how we build this out, as opposed to just putting blanket requirements that have, it just is what it is. There's no way to kind of measure, what the real need is.
Because zoning ordinances are not meant to be subjective that way. They are supposed to be clearly defined.
Well, there is, though. If it says as needed, that becomes subjective.
But no, you're misunderstanding. So let's turn this off, just like Liberty University came in for their CUP for Williams Stadium. Part of that, a condition of that approval was, go out and do the traffic study, right? It could have been go out, do the traffic study, and build a sidewalk along this road in front of Williams Stadium, which there already is one, but let's say it wasn't. Same thing happened back with New Covenant School. When they came in to get their conditional use permit, the condition, one of the conditions that council approved said, at the time the city engineer determines that a sidewalk is required, you'll have to build it. You understand? It has nothing to do with this ordinance. If this ordinance was not adopted, they would still have a condition telling them that they're going to have to build a sidewalk.
I'm thinking more broadly, like as it applies to everybody, like the museum. We're going to keep having these questions.
Sure you are. And if you don't have some very set criteria of when they're not required, you're going to be inundated with some very political requests purely based on financial reasons, and that's really not a basis on whether to require the sidewalk or not. The variance request through the Board of Zoning Appeals would be the proper place for them to go. If you have a true hardship on whether or not the sidewalk should be built, that is the board that is in place to determine whether a variance is.
So there's opportunity to appeal that then.
But it's on set criteria. There has to be something peculiar to the property, property arrangement, topography, something that we already have built into this ordinance for reasons not to build it. Again, either you want to increase the city's sidewalk network or you don't.
What about blended areas that have long road frontage in varying slopes, 30%, 10%. Because we don't have that either in here. It's not a,
Well, the way the ordinance reads is when existing cross slopes in excess of 25% measured across the width of the right-of-way. So where it's blended, that's a good point, where you could build it in this section but not the other section. I mean, what do you think about that? I mean, technically, the way this is worded is you would have to do it in the areas that aren't, but not in the other areas.
That sounds like an average to me, measured across the width of the. Wait a minute. What's the width from road to
Curb to curb.
Curb to curb. Well, right-of-way line to right-of-way line is the right-of-way.
the width of the property, or just the
right-of-way.
Like
Okay.
a cross section.
Okay, a
not
cross
the-
section.
Not up
Okay.
and down.
Cross slopes.
Okay. We haven't officially done it, but Robin, we have ended the public hearing aspect of the meeting following Tom's rebuttal. So at this point, the public is not allowed to speak unless we call them forward. But if someone wants to call Mr. Heaton forward with if he has a question or a response, we can do that. Okay, Mr. Heaton, if you'd like to come forward.
Thank you. I appreciate that, because there are a couple of things that maybe I don't understand Tom's comment. But first, as regarding B, in our particular situation, I realize this is not a TRC review. We do have slopes in excess of 25% and stormwater conveyances, which would give us pieces of sidewalk all the way down because they couldn't be crossed, at least to my understanding, in compliance with what this code is saying. But moreover, to our CUP, my understanding is that the CUP was written in the subjunctive, which means sidewalk may be required, and he's right, required by the traffic engineer. But Mr. Rogers' point is exactly right when he says, by what criteria? The city wants the sidewalk, so that becomes the criteria, because we are within the bounds of our CUP, and we've not exceeded it. And it was not required when that CUP was granted. So why would it be required now, given the growth that was projected, planned, and achieved? We are still within the existing CUP, and we've not exceeded that. So what becomes the triggering mechanism other than that the city wants it? That's my question. I don't have a way of challenging that or appealing that if it's just what the traffic engineer wants, when in fact I'm within what the traffic engineer projected I would have done.
Well, we as a commission honestly can't address that concern right now.
But
that's a
thanks
separate.
for giving me the opportunity to make that point,
Right.
because it's a frustration for property owners who have to navigate these things every so often, and the ground shifts under your feet, and it's difficult to plan.
So we're not addressing the CUP issue here, but if you wanted to follow that up, would that be with you, with the engineer, or?
I would be happy to sit down with you
Okay.
and Lee Nolan to discuss your CUP, yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks for coming up. And we're looking at the broader issue of the entire sidewalk ordinance. And whether or not that applies to this case or similar circumstances, I think is the bigger picture here.
Go
ahead.
Well, I still have some questions for Tom. I know we're not looking at this case, but this is a typical. I mean, this is the kind of case we need to be looking at too. I mean, this is what the ordinance will cover. And I'm interested in the museum one. Question one is, how would this new proposed ordinance affect the museum point of honor property?
Well, I've looked at that, and their main address is on Cabell Street, so that is their primary frontage. So the way this ordinance is written, they would be required to complete the sidewalk on Cabell. And then their secondary street would be whichever one has the most vehicles per day. If Norwood has more than 100 vehicles per day, they would be required to build the sidewalk. If not,
Passing their property, not
correct,
Norwood
not
on up the
just
road.
on their property line. If not, if they don't have more than 100 vehicles per day, then they wouldn't be required to build it on Norwood. They would be required to build it on Cabell.
And Cabell was the one they mostly didn't want to do, right? Because they don't have, that was the one they were complaining about. Was Cabell?
It is.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
But I think if you go to that area, or even pull up the photography of that area, you can see that a sidewalk could very easily be constructed along that frontage of Cabell Street.
And just to clarify back to the New Covenant property, I don't understand what was waived. The requirement that they build a sidewalk right now was waived, right?
Right.
They are building the weight room.
Right.
And so
Has nothing to do with this ordinance.
Okay. So do they have a general get-out-of-jail-free card from now on? Or if they want to build a chapel and we pass this ordinance, then and the chapel is more than 5,000 square feet, this kicks in?
So the way the condition is worded, what was the date on this? Back in 2001, condition number 4 says the school may, which is subjective, yes it is, may have to install a sidewalk along the Fleetwood Drive frontage of the property at any time after completion of Phase 1, which I think Phase 1 has been long completed, if required by the city traffic engineer. So these subjective things this is the result of it, because now we're sitting here having these discussions.
Nancy's question is, if the city's traffic engineer says it's not required, will what they're proposing be an example of this variance kicking in?
This has no relation to this
Right.
I agree.
at all.
That's not what we're asking.
But if they build something else that's 5,000 square feet, then this does kick in.
This does kick in.
This ordinance?
Yes.
No. Because
Why?
they're still under this.
That's what Nancy was asking.
So they do have a get-out-of-jail-free card.
Yeah, if the city engineer keeps saying, no, you don't need to build it, I think that's
Okay.
very bad. But that's kind of the way it is.
Okay. All right. So then, but that's a good point, though. So that sort of puts it to, that's a CUP.
Okay.
Now,
Yeah.
whether the city engineer is going to keep saying that, I don't know.
So their improvement to the weight room had nothing to do with the city saying, now it's time for you to put a sidewalk up. It was just the engineer said, I think it's time for them to do a sidewalk.
I can't say that the new sidewalk ordinance, because the city is requiring other institutions and other businesses to build these sidewalks, that didn't weigh into the city engineer's mind that, hey, maybe it is time for you to go ahead and build your sidewalk. You probably should have done it a long time ago. I would think quite possibly that, the next improvement that they come in with, the city engineer is more than likely going to require them to build that sidewalk. Again, the only way for them to get away from that condition would be to go back to council and have them to amend it, remove the condition. If council does remove the condition, whatever's left in the zoning ordinance after we get through this process is what they'll have to comply with. Does that make sense?
And I will leave that particular one alone.
Okay.
I want to clarify, too, for new developments, the city pays 50% of sidewalks.
Residential only.
Residential only.
Correct.
So that Bell Terrace
Would be
development,
cost shared 50-50.
50/50. I guess I have a little bit of an issue, a couple things with the fact that the developers are getting assistance because it's new, and we have existing folks that bearing a greater percentage of the burden. And I like to relate things back to traffic. And we've been told that we can't put the burden of a traffic light on the most recent developer. And it seems like we're putting the burden of the sidewalk on the person who is doing the most recent disturbance. And I'm not sure that's fair.
Well, but the Bell development, who's paying to build the streets?
They would build the street. The only thing that's cost shared is the curb, gutter, sidewalk.
Okay, so they're building the streets and they're improving all that property. So there's certainly a win in it for the city. There's a reason for the city to cost share because we want sidewalks and we want curbs and gutters.
Well, we want residential, single-family residential development,
Right.
and that's why that provision was put in the subdivision ordinance as a way to encourage single-family development in the city instead of outside in the county, where sidewalks aren't required and curb and gutter is not required.
Right. Okay. But I see what you're saying, Mr. Farrell, about the last guy to do it gets hit with the...
Right. And we're not supposed to do that when it comes to traffic issues.
I don't understand what you mean that the last person that does it gets hit with the improvement.
Well,
It's only across the frontage of their property. It's not like it's the entire
True.
street.
yeah.
But if they make an improvement to an existing property that's not had to have sidewalks, and they make an improvement that means they have to have another one of those examples you showed.
Yeah, and it's really no difference if you come in and you're doing a building improvement, whatever. This might be a bad example, but I think it's very relevant. The city is interested in protecting its water source, correct? So anytime you come in to do anything, you have to put in a backflow preventer. No questions asked. You're going to put it in if you want to get your building permit, because that's the city standard, right? You're going to do it. If you come in and do an improvement and whatever says you need to widen that section of road or put in a turn lane, you're going to do it, right? Because it's a requirement, it's a standard of the development to make it safe. But yet when it comes to the safety of the pedestrian and encouraging walking and alternative modes of transportation, all of these things that we give lip service to in our comprehensive plan, we're having this great big debate about it because we think it's putting some undue burden on the people that are creating the need for it, right? So it's either we're going to support the comprehensive plan and we're going to truly encourage walkability in the city, or we're not.
I'd just like to jump in there, devil's advocate. I talked with Ms. Ann there when we did the pop-up there, because I missed the last meeting on sidewalks. And my concern is, okay, in the residential area, someone has a wide front yard. Somehow he gets stuck with having to put a sidewalk there. What's the city code for clearing the sidewalk in inclement weather? Who's responsible for clearing that sidewalk?
Responsibility of the property.
Okay. And so when the city truck comes by, clears the road, and puts 2 feet of slush and snow and ice on top of that sidewalk, that homeowner, age 60 plus, is responsible for moving all of that.
That's the way it is. This is life.
Yeah. And so the concern is, if we don't have the sidewalk there, like if you put a sidewalk across my house on Link Road there.
So would you like us not to plow the street? Or?
Oh, y'all plow it anyway. That's one of the reasons I live on Link. It's always plowed. I'm one of the first people on the road. But I don't have a sidewalk there.
I mean,
but
in
the
all
whole
due
thing
respect,
is
I don't. The amount of snow we get and the infrequency, the fact that somebody would be required to shovel a sidewalk, and it's really not an argument. And I don't see anybody out there, sidewalk police, writing people tickets for not shoveling their sidewalk.
I reckon that's my concern. Do we get to that point where we have sidewalk?
And we're really not talking about residential subdivisions
Yeah.
anyway. We're talking about institutional, industrial, retail, commercial areas.
And I do have a thing there about the sidewalk to nowhere. Come down Boonesboro Road, and I was coming up when James River Day School said, "Oh yeah, we talked about the improvements there." It's like, oh yep, there is a sidewalk, and it ends nowhere. And I started looking at this. Are we really?
It ends at that end,
Yeah.
but you can take that sidewalk a very long way back towards Riverline.
You can take back to Rivermont, but it doesn't go anywhere further. It just ends right there at the end of the property.
And again, it's a start, and you're developing the city over time. Think where we've been if we'd been doing this 20 years ago.
What was the Hawkins Graves decision?
They didn't move forward with it.
They didn't move forward because they couldn't do the sidewalk.
Right. And again, we agree that requiring that amount of sidewalk for that small of an addition would be not
Right.
be equitable. Now,
So-
if they came in and redeveloped that property, sure,
Yeah.
I think that would be fair.
I guess one of the things one of the things that I kind of pause when I see this is when I look at what we have as a city. I live in a very urban area. Block behind my house has a sidewalk. The next block, which is very dense, no sidewalks at all on a city street. Now I look at other examples. I do see that James River, it's connected. It's a connected sidewalk, but in places like Hawkins Graves, and I use that example because that's already been out there. I wonder why, or maybe I'm missing it, that we don't have some kind of overlay where we really, as a city, kind of put our money where our mouth is and actually work to develop infrastructure, as opposed to places like Hawkins Grave or Fleetwood, where arguably you could argue that no one will ever develop a sidewalk. There's two churches there. Hawkins Grave, there's like an empty lot and some other stuff down below it. And so really you will have a sidewalk that doesn't connect because no one's going to tear a church down in the next 15, 20 years and develop it. So then I look at, but then I just look at the other areas, why aren't we trying to develop that out? You can't make a homeowner, if you build a new house on a lot, do you have to build a sidewalk if there is none?
No.
So here we're going to have this situation where I feel like you need more, you actually have to be able to have a better framework around it, to develop that system. But we have big chunks of our city that, maybe 50 or 100 years down the road, they might be that dense. But
so where do you start?
I think as a city, we start in the areas where they really do have a need, where there's actually a need, where there's issues that require people to walk, and they walk to a bus stop, or children are walking to their bus stop.
So do you have an example?
Yeah, Early Street.
Okay.
Several blocks long there have no sidewalk, but children walk all the time.
How about Timberlake Road?
Well, good. That's another example. Maybe there's people that are walking there,
Because
and
people
we're starting
walk
to
the side of that road every day, and
we're starting to build that out. But that's dense. That's an
as
area that's
part of
actually,
this ordinance.
Well, what I'm saying though is that's an area that there's a density we're looking for as a city there. Are we looking for that same kind of density on Fleetwood? Are there areas that we're not looking for that? It's always going to be R1 or R2. It's not going to be as dense. And then we say, well, maybe that requirement in those areas isn't, should be a little bit different. And that's what I'm saying is I think I look at our comprehensive plan and say there's some areas in our city that actually need more of that, and there's some areas that we don't foresee a need in our comprehensive plan just based on the density we're thinking it's going to be. Do you see what I'm saying?
I understand what you're saying. I don't agree with it. Again, respectfully, because we have a comprehensive plan that promotes walkability across the entire city. And who are we to say that, okay, this development's in this area, but just because you work here, we're not going to encourage walking in this area. We don't think you need to walk in this area. We don't think that you would ever have to be able to walk from this bus stop down to to your job here or whatever. Again, I think that if we're truly going to stand behind our comprehensive plan, we should keep at least what we're proposing here in terms of requirements. We certainly shouldn't go below what we have drafted here.
One of the things, I do support the plan. Don't get me wrong, I do support the plan. I'm just looking, I see a hodgepodge of sidewalks. I see areas where we desperately need sidewalks, especially on Old Forest Road going out to 221. Because there are people that are walking right there in that little curb there in the morning or the evening, and they don't wear bright clothing. You have to sense them because they're going to work, coming home from work, or whatever. Their lives are at risk there if people are not paying attention there. But there's stretches where there's no sidewalk. And then we have situations where you have a sidewalk to here, then on this other side of the road, it continues, and it's like that. So if you're to walk the sidewalk, you're constantly crossing a street.
Sure, and over time, if there gets enough of those sections, then the city could come in as part of a study or on its own initiatives and fill in the gaps. Now, again, I think the mentality that we need to be in as a city is, what is the city standard? No one argues when somebody wants to put a new road in, right? Because we're thinking vehicular traffic, vehicular traffic, vehicular traffic. We're not giving any thought to other means of transportation. I would argue that if we pulled up the city's network of water lines and sewer lines, there's probably some disconnects there too. Yet if you want to develop a piece of property, guess what you're going to extend? A water line or a sewer line.
It's very expensive.
Which are very expensive, because that's the city standard, that you'll have city water and sewer. Yet we're debating on whether or not walkability is important, even when...
I think for me, I'm not debating that at all. My concern is the rigidness of this. And I understand what you're saying, that in these other realms, this rigidness exists. But when I look at something like the Lynchburg Museum Foundation, it would be nice if we didn't ever have to make exceptions. But this commission exists because we make exceptions. And I can see cases where there might be exceptions.
So what would you base that exception on for the Cabell Street property?
I don't know. I mean, it's something that would have to be looked at.
It's if you could do a traffic study of pedestrians, but if you build it, they will come too. If you had a sidewalk beside Point of Honor, people would walk on it, I'm quite sure. Across the street, it seems to me the sidewalk is kind of rocky and not so great. I'm not sure.
If you look at that entire neighborhood, there's a very eclectic grouping of sidewalks, and the majority of them are on both sides of the street.
Yeah, I think there's some granite sidewalks there, and they're a little bit trippy, and so having a nice smooth sidewalk there wouldn't be a bad thing at all. And I would think with the bike trail right below and people walking down to the bike trail, I mean, you now have an access to the bike trail at the bottom of Cabell Street. Having a good sidewalk down that street wouldn't hurt anything. Of course, I'm not paying for it. I guess the Museum Foundation is paying for it, and they will have to raise another $100,000 to do it or whatever. I think this is a good start. I mean, what we're doing is making it more flexible than it was. It used to talk about rigid. It used to be quite rigid, and this is giving us, or didn't we talk about doing a matrix of if this then that? And you didn't really do a matrix, but you did say if it is, if there are fewer than 100 vehicle trips per day, then they don't have to put it on the secondary street, that kind of thing. So at any rate, I think you've added a lot of flexibility to what was there, so I think it's a good start.
And again, this is our recommendations. If the Planning Commission doesn't feel this goes far enough, please tell us what you would like to see.
Well, honestly, I was not part of the last meeting. I almost feel like I need to look at do some homework and look at some examples from other places and just see what else is out there. We're not the first ones to deal with this issue.
Right.
And I wonder if there are ways to have more flexibility built in without opening the barn door to everyone getting exempted or waivers.
I think it's I had done some looking around, and I have a copy of an ordinance from Nashville, and it's actually their third. I think this must be a bigger issue, all over the place, and there's some objective measures they put in. But I think then you get in a problem like you're saying, Tom, if you have these objective measures and you're in a place where you really do need a sidewalk, well then that's why I was asking about overlays, areas that, if you had a matrix that you might be able to have some really logical checks, but. And they're in Nashville based on cost and size of projects. Cost as a percentage of assessment, size as a percentage of square foot.
Which is why we did the 5,000 square feet. We landed on that number because that's the trigger for stormwater. Maybe that's too small. Maybe it's too big. From what you guys what I'm hearing today is maybe that's too small of an improvement to require a sidewalk of that magnitude. But you also have to consider, a property such as the Florida Avenue one that's, I forget what it's zoned, it's obviously zoned B5 or higher, with 400 and some feet of frontage. There could be quite a bit of development on that property, all right? So, and there is quite a bit of square footage there. At what point are you going to require that? Again, we're behind, in developing our pedestrian network. Mm-hmm. If we'd been doing this 20, 30 years ago, we'd have been further ahead in what we're trying to accomplish as a city.
Can I ask about something I'm sure you were here when they did this? So they built a Starbucks and a UPS store in Boonesboro Shopping Center, but they never put a sidewalk in. And was that because they had a parking lot and they can just use their parking lot as a sidewalk? They have a sidewalk connector that goes up to the sidewalk at the stop-in or whatever that is now, but then nothing else. There are no other sidewalks.
There's no requirement for it.
Yeah. Yeah, so why when they built that, there was no requirement for sidewalks? Because
there was no requirement for sidewalk until 2016.
Oh, so, okay.
Except as part of single-family.
This is because I wasn't on the
very
commission.
new. Yeah.
Okay.
Very new.
No, again, this is definitely a much-needed addition.
Yeah, I am in complete support of the sidewalk ordinances, and as a real estate agent that does many, many town tours for people coming in, I can't tell you how many times people want to go, or I'm seeing it as a fad recently where people want to go in places where they can walk to, restaurants and shops and maybe to work, and so I definitely am in favor of it. I feel for New Covenant schools, and I'm, I completely understand having that kind of burden thrown on you at the tune of $100,000 would be really hard to swallow and could make or break a development that you might be doing. But it sounds like that is separate, and that's based on something that was decided long ago when there was originally a CUP. So it doesn't sound like the sidewalk ordinance would really necessarily impact New Covenant. It might be
It is separate. I think that at some point there needs to be a discussion of when that sidewalk is going to be required. If that requirement went away and this ordinance was adopted, if they stayed below the 5,000 square foot threshold for their additions, which I just heard you say you were going to do, there wouldn't even be a discussion about it. because it wouldn't be required. So, but because they're still under the old condition, it still is lingering out there.
I think
So it's kind of like if that condition wasn't there, they've kind of already built out, they would get a pass. Now, whether that's right or wrong, that's how it would work, because they're not going to do any additions over 5,000 square feet. Now, if they did, obviously it would kick in.
But the museum's still in a bad position for themselves. They're going to have to do something. Yeah.
Yes, and quite frankly, I think they should have to build that sidewalk, because they're in an area, they're bringing in children, they're in the middle of a residential neighborhood. Why wouldn't you want to have sidewalks around your facility?
They're in a historic district, and they're a historic facilities.
And there's a sidewalk directly down the side of that property that stops at their steps. So you're essentially saying, hey, it's okay for you to walk down here to the steps, but don't walk up from here to the steps. I mean, actually, if you look at it hard enough, it's hard to imagine that there wasn't a sidewalk there at some point. I mean, we can pull it up on the GIS and look at it if you like.
Nancy probably has a photo from back in the day.
And do we as a planning commission need to respond to this letter since it was written to us? I mean, would it be?
It would be the same as the person being here. So they're providing that information to us, and they can view the minutes or the videotaping of it.
To see how we discuss.
Yeah. Tom, this is the same as any other petition. We make a recommendation to City Council. It goes to them regardless of our recommendation, right?
Well, I mean, if you want to recommend on it today, you need to either approval or denial or change it, or you can table it and have more discussion. But yes,
Right.
Council does have the final say.
Right. Sure.
Do you feel that we have enough information to approve the recommendation as the changes are set forth by Tom?
Well, Dave, you said you'd like a little more time to see what other people are doing, and I'd like to give you more time to see what other people are doing. So I'd move to table it. And then it suddenly starts. Who built that side? Didn't they build that sidewalk when they improved it?
I'm really not sure if the city built the.
Yeah. Well,
Sure.
That doesn't feel like it.
But you see it stops, and then if you look at the area,
It's more ADA compliant than the grass.
Yeah.
right? I mean, it's essentially flat, goes right up against the wall. The poles are in identical locations.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, here's a lady crossing.
There's a walker there.
and what does the sidewalk look like on the other side of the street down below? Yeah, it's granite. It's little bumpy.
Flagstones.
Yeah.
And if you get down here to the end,
It's actually.
that's just where.
Well, what they're planning on doing, they're
It's a good sidewalk.
Was that required?
Yeah.
I mean, the addition that they're making, though, is it actually going to be larger than 5,000 square feet?
They're doing quite a bit of land disturbance.
So it would be over that 5,000 number.
Right, I believe that's the way it's worded, right? It's
Even doing that, they'd be doing a lot of land disturbance, just putting
5,000
sidewalk.
cubic.
Right.
Disturbing less than 5,000.
So it's not just 5,000 square feet of finished building addition.
Right.
It's 5,000
okay, so it's
land
so
disturbance.
so everything they're planning on doing is over the 5,000 square feet limit.
I
According
mean,
to
maybe you look at it as building square footage.
So that's how I interpreted was.
That's not what that says, though.
You're all
But
disturbing.
when you're disturbing and you put it in a building, now mentally I'm visual 5,000 square footprint.
Yeah, but typically, if they're putting in a 5,000
It's
square
huge.
foot building, they
that's a warehouse.
grade 20,000 square feet. I mean, it's just.
It doesn't matter how tall the building is. I mean, if it has a smaller footprint than this, 40 stories tall. Well, they're going to be.
Well, it's the
parking
square
around
footage of
that.
the building.
Oh, it is.
But whatever they've sent
of the
in,
disturbance.
you're seeing that
This
they're
is land
disturbed.
disturbance building anything, is the way that's worded.
So we're talking about land,
Right.
not
It's the footprint.
vertical.
Yeah.
Dirt moving,
Yeah.
grading, that kind of thing.
And whatever the point of honor is suggesting, it's going to be over 5,000 square feet of land
More than
disturbance.
likely.
More than likely, yes. I mean, but at what point are we going to, you know, who's going to be the next person that's going to come in, and we're going to tailor the ordinance to
Right.
just, you know, make sure it works for you so you don't have to do it? I mean, at
No,
what point are you
I
going to?
totally understand.
I understand, I'm not arguing that.
But if we have the rule, I mean, if it's there, I was just making sure.
You can change this.
No,
If you
I know.
don't
I was
think-
just making sure.
I do
Right.
think what you said was it's cumulative, and I didn't. Oh, you do say 5,000 cumulative, but somehow I didn't realize that meant you come back 2 years from now and build another 1,000, 2,000.
Right, the point is that you don't come in and build 499,
Right.
and then 2 years from now build another 499,
Right.
just to get around the sidewalk requirement. It's the same way the stormwater ordinance is. You know, you don't come in and disturb 499, and then come back in a month and disturb another 499, so you don't have to do your stormwater management.
Right, and the clock starts when the ordinance is approved, right? It's, I mean,
Right.
if
Well,
they
when
did
you
something
submit.
last year, that
No.
wasn't.
It wouldn't count.
So Nancy, you mentioned something about the historical aspect of point of honor, and I'm sitting there looking at it. Now, yes, I see a need for a sidewalk, but I'm looking at the cost, because they're going to have to remove those walls. to put in.
There's room.
There-
Yeah,
5 feet.
where the wall was.
But the point is, there will be a case where the cost is going to be crazy expensive,
it's
and the
prob-
benefits are not going to. I mean, there's always going to be an example, whether we're dealing with it now or down the road,
Yeah.
where someone's going to be, this is just not a realistic scenario.
And it's
and I-
probably more expensive than
Yeah, so
$50 because they probably want to do brick.
Is
And
that
that-
less than 5 feet?
It's just like.
and that gets back to my point of the lack of flexibility, the lack of appeal.
You
Oh.
mentioned if somebody didn't have the money, they could go file for.
But it can't be based on financial hardship,
No.
right? It would have to be something peculiar to that site that makes the sidewalk unbuildable. And
If that is 3 feet wide, for instance, then you would, and they could say, well, we can't take out that stone wall, that's historic. or something.
right, and if there wasn't room to build it without taking out that stone wall, which that probably wouldn't happen because we're talking about building it in the right of way, that would obviously be a grounds for a variance, because obviously no one would suggest that they should take out the stone
Yeah,
wall.
that's why I was asking about this stone wall put.
I mean, it would. I mean, look, it's just exactly like what exists.
Right.
But what if that's 4 feet, 10 inches? Is that,
Then that would probably be grounds for a variance because
Right,
of the
the
existing
width.
wall.
Okay.
Yeah.
So now we're getting to answering the question there. Because, no, I look at that, that doesn't look 5 feet.
I don't know, Tom, you think you could lay from the curb to the wall?
But again, regardless, whether it is or not, there could be an example of that down the road.
Exactly. There,
So-
I'm sure there will be. Murphy's Law says
Yeah.
if you have a rule, there will be an
Right.
exception.
So I guess the question is, for us, do we want to send it to council, recommending either for or against, or do we gain anything by tabling it and bringing it back? If it's, especially if it's going to come back exactly the same.
Right.
And I'm not sure we gain anything by that.
I mean, I think the changes are good, the ones that you've made. I'm nervous to say, let's go for it, just because I don't feel like I know enough about it. But again, I'm not sure how much research I'd be able to do before next time that would add anything of value to it.
What information would you want?
That packet that Ann made of like other studies, other cities' policies.
When we first doing the ordinance?
Yeah.
I mean, I guess I do feel for the people that are like New Covenant and like the point of honor that are having these burdens put forth on them that they're already, I don't know. I feel for them in that.
And I do too. And let me ask you this: if a new school of that size came in and requested a conditional use permit to go on a residential piece of property, would you be thinking about requiring a sidewalk in front of it?
Probably, yes.
Right.
The other thing is that apparently they knew 16 years ago that this could happen at some point. And when you have that hanging over you, I think you start planning for the inevitable and start, getting some funds set aside for what you know is going to be coming down the road.
I do think that distorts because of that we talk about in that case, that's very subjective. So it's easier to look at it outside of that, because I think that subjectivity is a problem. And I mean it's not. It isn't. There isn't that in this.
Right. This is not subjective.
This is
That's what's
pretty
good
clear.
about
The
this.
question, like you said, is really: is it too restrictive or is it not restrictive enough?
And I don't.
And I've heard, like, if it were me and if it was a school and everybody was paying, I'd probably say, well, if I'm the city, I'll pay for it because that's less students in my city system that I have to pay for. So I think there's benefits to nonprofits, but see, you can't just eliminate all nonprofits either.
Sure. And again, there's no doubt that the city's nonprofits do great things for the city. I mean, our culture, education, all the above. Yet, you're taking X amount of property and you're taking it that could have been used for single-family development or other type of residential development, and it's not able to use that anymore, right? So, where are we approving these things? Maybe we should be approving them in more dense areas where the infrastructure is already there to support it, rather than putting them out on greenfield sites.
I mean, my bottom line is, I've already said it, I'm not comfortable with the rigidness of it, and so I probably would vote against it, but I am comfortable with sending that on to City Council and letting them debate it. They'll be able to review all of our arguments over the past hour, and letting them decide whether or not it's worthy to move forward or to send back. I actually feel they almost need to be part of this discussion.
Maybe more people show up to voice opinions too.
I don't want to keep bouncing it around back and forth. I understand it's valuable to do that at times to keep it at our level, but this may be an example where sending it on to them with whatever vote we come up with might not be a bad thing.
And I understand that, and I think it would be helpful if you tell us what is too rigid about it. And if you need more time to think about that,
that's the problem. I just don't know, and I don't know whether looking at other examples might allow. I guess one thing is that there's no way to appeal something.
There is a way to appeal it. You go to the board of zoning appeal. What I'm telling you, what I'm trying to suggest to you is if you want to put an appeal process in here, that it comes to the planning commission or it goes to council or whatever, that's great. Be more than happy to do that. But there needs to be some very objective criteria on what that appeal is going to be based upon, rather than someone coming in and saying, I really don't feel like building this sidewalk because we didn't raise money for it, right? Or we didn't budget for it. It needs to be a reason.
I was hoping we'd have that matrix. That's what I thought when we talked about in the last meeting, that would be really helpful. To have something then that you could apply to.
Well, and when staff discussed it, we thought these were the things that were reasonable: the amount of traffic on the street and the size of the development. Obviously, some of you still have concerns, and what I'm trying to ask is what those are, so we could come back and draft something that would make you more comfortable.
I guess my point is I'm not sure, and I would just want City Council to be aware that I'm not sure, and that this is something that, and they do this, but that this is something they would tackle and discuss.
Well, they will, because we're only making recommendations, and they will make the final decisions.
Yeah.
I think what Tom and his staff has put together is a very good piece of work. I don't see the rigidity in it. I'm aware there is an exception to every rule. There is an appeals process. It's not spelled out here, excuse me. And I agree with Tom. You know, the exception should not be that, well, I want to do this, but I'm sorry, I'm not going to raise money for a sidewalk. But you know, we have to have something. I agree with you, Tom. We have to have something going forward. We cannot go back and change history, though some people think we can. We can't change history. It's already been done. We need to look forward and try to address what's going to happen down the road. And I think what we have here is a way to do that. And I think we need to go ahead and send to the city council. They can listen to the tapes, view the video, hear our concerns. I, for one, I think it stands pretty much on its own. And if we need to put down what are the exceptions that need to go to an appeals board, we need to come back and tell Tom, what are they?
I don't think we can think of them all. I mean, I can think of one right now is if the width for the sidewalk is impeded by a wall and you've only got 4 feet 5 inches or something, does that mean you don't have to do a sidewalk at all, or you have to build a 4 foot 5 inch sidewalk?
That would be grounds for a variance.
Which, a variance for no sidewalk or a narrower sidewalk?
A narrower sidewalk.
Okay. But, okay.
I mean, is a 4 foot 6 inch sidewalk better than no sidewalk?
It sure is. But we can't, we are only thinking of the, and then the slope, you yourself question whether the cross slopes in excess of 25% measured across the width of the right-of-way, whether,
Have related across the entire property frontage, yes.
Right. And so that is something that would be, questionable. And I don't know whether we need to answer those questions before we send it to council. I mean, or think up all these possible problems, because we're not going to think of them all. No. But people will have all kinds of reasons to want to appeal, whether it's written, codified or not.
I understand. I also think that if you're forwarding it on to council with things that just saying, I don't know, I'm not sure what benefit that's going to be to council. It's just like, hey, you figure it out, all right? I mean, if you need more time, we should take more time and think about it instead of just sending them something that you're not truly comfortable with.
I don't mind spending time looking. I have examples here, but I don't mind spending more time finding more.
Okay.
And maybe we should just take a couple more weeks and think about it, and maybe you could send us if you have some PDFs of those, you could forward them to the group and we could read over them and just think about it. At least take some more time before we send it to City Council.
A great deal of ordinances from other localities when we were rewriting this the first time back in 2016. So.
Can you share those?
Oh, absolutely.
The pieces of them. We don't want the whole thing, but the sidewalk parts, yeah.
We'd like to make a motion that we table this to a future date to be determined so that we can review other ordinances.
I'll second that.
All in favor? Aye. All right. We get to revisit it at a later date. Thank you all. Yep, that is our last public hearing item. Now on to any new or old business, which leads us to the annual Planning Commission report.
Yes, sir, Mr. Chair. The annual report for fiscal year 17 is in your Dropbox. Obviously, I'm not going to go over the intimate details of it, but Planning Commission reviewed 25 petitions last year, and that's 25 items, including street namings, flume amendments, rezonings, and conditional use permits. Also highlighted in the report is the retreat we did last fall. I think that was a good exercise for planning staff as well as Planning Commission to familiarize ourselves with the large number of existing plans that we have, and also get to know each other a little bit better. And also included in the report are, notes about the zoning ordinance, the the first round of corrections that we took to City Council last year, as well as the need for ongoing tweaks to provide a more clear and cohesive result for the reader, such as sidewalks today. And also the comprehensive plan implementation matrix is included in it. So again, I'll be happy to go over any. The matrix is not on this.
Do you change
Sure.
things? The commission retreat was in 2016,
That's right.
not 2017.
October 2017 haven't happened yet.
Unless we're having another one. That's fine.
We do not have one scheduled at this time, but if that's something you guys want to do, we could look forward to that.
Any other comments about the report? Thank you all planning for putting that together. And I think it summarizes a lot of good stuff over the past year. Any other new or old items? The only thing I wanted to add, because it's kind of, it would not fall into last year's report, is what's been going on with the downtown plan. I know planning has put a lot of time and effort into that work, and I went to the final presentation meeting, was really impressed by some of the stuff that's been proposed, and I'm excited about where it's going. And I was also impressed by the level of public involvement, and that's a tribute to your all's efforts to make that happen. I know some of you all were involved with the pop-ups, so thanks for doing that. It's neat to see the level of interest in what's going on downtown, and I hope that will continue to other areas of the city as other plans are updated. So.
Right. We appreciate you all being involved in those, and we'd encourage you to continue to be a part of the public process so that it's not a new thing when we bring it to you. You've kind of seen some of the background. And I didn't include a lot of that in this. It's on the matrix, but since a lot of that didn't actually happen during the fiscal year, it'll be detailed in the next year.
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay.
At what point will we see it?
The downtown plan?
I'm thinking November, December timeframe. We've got a meeting on Friday to kind of talk about next steps, but what they're doing now is taking the citizen feedback and the results of the design form and putting them into a draft document. More than likely, we'll have another public meeting on the draft document prior to it coming to you for a work session public hearing. But November, December-ish time frame is when we're expecting it to be. And then we start Tyriana.
Good.
We do pop-ups over there?
If you want to. No sidewalk to.
Hey, Ron, did you get a hold of GLTC?
Rob, did you get a hold of GLTC? I've been busy with my daughter's wedding since the pop-up and everything about that.
Forgive me, you gotta
the app,
remind me.
The phone app for tracking the buses.
I didn't. Was that to help with them?
Well,
I'm sorry, you got to refresh my memory.
Well, one of the, I think, Lynchburg college student said,
Oh,
come
so
down from
that you'd like to
D.C.
have an app so that...
Oh, there is.
so they can track the buses there on the phone, because I'm in D.C.
There is an app for that.
There is.
It's called Ride Systems.
Cool.
Oh, okay.
You just download Ride Systems, and then you select Greater
Okay, I wasn't
Lynchburg
aware
Transit
of that.
Company, and you can see them driving around in real time.
Oh, that's neat.
Oh, way.
It's cool.
Okay, cool.
So we already got that. Okay, that's cool.
She's a computer nerd.
Shows how often I ride a bus.
So one of the hot button things was the two-way traffic. So what was it in these pop-ups? What was the general consensus that you all got?
So when I went to, they had two-way traffic. They had different, two-way, one-way, and Post-it notes that people stuck on them. And so one said yes, and one said no, and then somebody wrote hell yes, and somebody wrote hell no.
I was at the one. There was a lady who was really upset about it. She was like, I like how it is. Everybody just goes flying down the road. I know speed's a problem. And so I'm wondering, I think we might have talked about her. It was down in the Riverviews. And, wondering if people really understood what that meant, what the two-way traffic did or what the idea is.
Well, I will say the presentation that was given involved that, and they did a really good job addressing pros and cons and where it would most likely go. I was impressed by that. So, and I don't know whether that presentation was taped or is available. The one at Rep. Craddock-Terry.
We have.
No.
Yeah.
It was not taped, but we did put the PowerPoint
Okay.
out there.
Yeah. Yeah, that would be good. All right. Any other items? Motion to adjourn. Second. All in favor?
Aye.
All right. Thank you all very much.